radio TV phono nut, and we have a little mini GE tombstone radio from about 1939. I think this is just a 5-tube series string set, and if you're wondering about the cabinet finish, that's not a later paint job. It was originally this color, and of course now the finish needs to be overhauled, but we'll worry about that later, maybe way later, but right now we need to get it working properly. Looking at the bottom, we see a couple of newer type screws, so we know someone has been in this thing fairly recently. Okay, we have the chassis out of the cabinet, and look here at the major sheet of asbestos stapled to the side of the cabinet. I better go get my straw and start snorting this. Okay, looking at the top of the chassis, it looks unusually clean for a radio this age, but our speaker looks like it's seen better days, so that's either going to have to be repaired or replaced. And the chassis, I don't really see no evidence of a whole lot being done to it except all this. I don't know what all this is they have in here. Alright, we're plugged in at about half AC input. Nothing alarming is happening yet. Alright, I'm hearing a little noise from the speaker. And we have a little reception, so let's crank it up some. Alright, we're at 120 volts. And that's about all we have. Very distorted. Of course, a lot of that is due to the severely damaged speaker, but I suspect we have a leaky coupling cap too. 7, 8 volts on the control grid, 9 volts on the control grid. Yeah, we better turn that off, or we're going to cremate that output tube in short order. So I guess the first order of business is replace this guy right here. That's the coupling cap between the first audio and detector tube and the audio output tube. It's supposed to keep DC off of the control grid of the output tube, but whenever it's basically has turned into a resistor, it no longer does its job. And this 400K grid bias resistor for the output tube is up to 716K, so I'm going to have to unsolder that connection to get the capacitor out, so I might as well go ahead and get rid of the resistor while I'm at it. Alright, what about the cathode bias resistor? 158 ohms. Well, that one may not be too terribly bad. Okay, the way you read these old dog bone resistors is body, end, dot, or bed is an easy way to remember that. So the body of the resistor is yellow. That's the first digit, which is 4. And then the end, which is black, that's 0, so that's the second digit, 40. And then the yellow is dot, and since of course the dot is the same color as the body, then it's going to blend together, so you're not actually going to see a dot. So that's times 10,000, so 40 times 10,000 is 400K ohms. And in this application we could go with either a 390K or a 470K. It's not all that critical, but since 390 is closer to 400, and that's what we'll go with, assuming I have one, but 700K plus is way out of tolerance. And if this had a gold band on the other end, that would indicate 5% tolerance. A silver band would be 10%, or no band at all, which is the case with this resistor, would be 20%, but still 700 plus K that's out of the 20% ballpark, so it needs to be replaced. Okay, the cathode resistor, body brown 1, green 5, and then our dot is brown, so that would be times 10, so that would be 150 ohms. The meter says if this thing would ever make connection here. Come on, stay there. 158 ohms. Now if we look at the other end of this resistor, that's a silver band, so that indicates a 10% resistor, and plus or minus 10% of 150 would be plus or minus 15 ohms from that, so we're reading 158 ohms, so that resistor is still within tolerance, and it can stay. Yeah, that capacitor was a .005 at 1,000, and the way it was soldered on here, I know this is not factory. This wire is way newer than the rest of the wiring in here, so this plate load resistor, which I checked, and it's within tolerance, it should go from here to here, and then the capacitor should go from here to here, and I suspect the reason they did it this way is because whatever capacitor they hacked in didn't have long enough leads on it, so they just improvised.
Out today to remind everyone they're kicking off their new campaign for the year. Now, I'm sure you heard it's been an awful time for the officers, so they're going to be supporting efforts to elect lawmakers to advocate to fight for those who protect our nation's citizens. If we were to send you a support envelope in the mail, could the officers count on you to return a one-time donation for the drive?
Hell no. Let's see, didn't they call here during one of my other videos wanting money? And just for the record, I don't have anything against the police, but I never give money to somebody calling over the phone. Heck, anybody could call and say they were from the collecting money for the police. If I decide to make a donation to the police department, I'll just go directly to the police department and go from there. Alright, we have this neatened up a little bit better. There's our coupling capacitor under the audio output transformer running over here, connected to the plate of the 12Q7 or whatever it is, and it's a lot better than the way they had it. Well, I realize it's kind of hard to tell with the speaker rattling, but I think it is less distorted from an electronic standpoint. Alright, that speaker cone is so jacked that I'm probably just going to go ahead and replace the speaker. It won't be a big deal. We have one with standard mounting for a change, but right now I just have another speaker clipped across it, or temporarily soldered across it.
11 times less likely to get spread. It's less likely to metamorphosize itself into something worse, all those other things. It's like, you know...
Well, I want my tuning condenser turned. Alright, just a stuck shaft.
Team President John against the Giants in Game 5 of the National League Division Series in Buster Olney will not renew the contracts of hitting coach Marcus Thames and third base coach Phil Nevin. In the NFL, the Chicago Bears put running back Damian Williams on the COVID list a short time.
Alright, let's go ahead and let our next cap be the across-the-line cap, because the way it's wired, if it shorts, it'll pop the rectifier tube, and I don't need to pop the 35Z5. I'm kind of running low on those, and just no need in popping it needlessly. Well, I noticed this has a Loctite tube in it, and based on that blob of solder I see, I'd say the original tube went bad or the socket went bad, and whoever worked on this didn't have either or, so they just replaced it with what they did have on hand, and that was a Loctite tube. And for the record, I hate Loctite tubes. I dislike them. Worse than miniature tubes. Well, it seems this capacitor had already blown its end out when I took one end loose and grabbed it and kind of gave it a yank. The whole end pulled out, so I don't think it was making connection anyway. Alright, I decided to put the line bypass cap on hold right now and go ahead and change our volume control coupling cap, and to make that easier I dismounted the volume control so I could turn it around and get to the terminal there. And I use these trusty old pair of pliers to remove the nut. This is what my uncle used to call, what did he call them? A pair of Model A pliers. And the reason he called them that is he said back in the day you could just about work on anything on a Model A with a pair of pliers like this, so I don't know. I just have to take his word for it. Alright, this grid bias resistor for the 12Q7 is up to 20 meg, and that seems high. That's brown. That B1, is that green or blue? I'm going to have to look at this a little further and try to find the dot on here. Sometimes these old resistors, the colors fade on them and it makes it a little hard to see, so that's why it's handy to have a schematic available. Okay, that was a 15 meg resistor, and I thought it was. I didn't have a 15 meg. I dug through my junk box and found a 10 meg with part of its lead cut off and a 4.7 meg, so I just put those in series, and I had to J-hook since the lead had been cut off of the resistor and it wasn't long enough to reach where it needed to reach. And we replaced the volume control coupling capacitor, which I think I already mentioned. And this big boy here, this 0.2, is the chassis, the capacitor that connects between circuit ground and the chassis to provide an RF ground for the chassis here.
Plan, the simplified employee pension plan, says any employee that's been with you 3.
And now it gets plenty loud and it's not all distorted like it was.
Percentage of your income that you put in.
Now, one thing I've noticed, not a lick of bad filter capacitor hum, and I'm not sure, but that can looks like it might be the original capacitor. But at any rate, it's not a recent replacement if it's ever been changed.
And so you're wanting to do that, so that and you can
Benefits Checkup.org is run by the nonprofit.
We're already getting some distant stations, and it's about 10 minutes to 6 in the evening. So that's pretty good considering this hasn't been aligned or anything.
News Gospel Radio in Meridian, Mississippi. It may be true, it may not be, but it's such a
people. Wants to make sure he's taking care of the return. Brings up the old phrase.
That capacitor is shorting. I'm going to have to clean the plates.
This is the backbone of America right here. This is a young man. They've done the hard work.
But once completed, I think this will be a good little radio. Now, back before World War II, GE made some top-notch stuff. And then right after the war, they continued to make some top-notch stuff. And I'm not saying they never made any more top-notch stuff after the war ended, into the 50s and 60s and beyond, but by about 1950, the bean counters had seriously gotten a hold of GE, and their quality of construction went way downhill. And by the 60s, it had really gotten bad. I guess as far as later GE stuff, I like their transistor radios, or I like some of them. Some of them could be a bear. Their tube radios and tube stereos and tube TVs, was not that crazy about them. Okay, I've done about all I'm going to do to this. I ended up having to mount the filter capacitors on a little terminal strip here. And in this case, it doesn't matter that they're hanging down below the chassis, because the way this is mounted in the cabinet, there's plenty enough clearance for that. But the real problem came in with the speaker. The original one, as you saw, was destroyed, and so I had to find another speaker. So I was fortunate enough to find one in my junk that had the mounting provisions for an audio output transformer. Well, the original transformer was permanently attached to the speaker, and even had I been able to get it off, it was too big to fit in here anyway with the terminal strip now in place. So I found another audio output transformer, a newer one that was smaller, attached it to this speaker, and technically it's too big. It butts right up against this terminal strip, so I had to put some tape on the transformer to insulate it. Yes, I realize some of this is a little sloppy looking, but sometimes when you have to make what you have work, then that's the way it is sometimes. And I didn't even use the signal generator to align this. I just aligned the IF trimmers by ear, and it's going back in the box, and that's it. I also need to find a number 47 bulb for it. I'm out of those. I need to order some. I'm really not too worried about it because once this goes up on the shelf, it's probably never going to get turned on again. There's one capacitor I realized I didn't replace. It's simply an isolation cap for the external antenna terminal. Once again, I'm not going to be connecting an external antenna to this, so I'm not bothering with it. In fact, I'm getting to the point with these old radios that given the lousy content that's on them, I'm going to do the bare minimum to get them working somewhat well. If that means only changing one or two capacitors, then that's all we're going to do, and then they're going up on the shelf. Because quite frankly, there's just really no need in going to the effort of fully overhauling these things just to put them up on the shelf and never use them because there's no decent content to be heard. But as you can see, there's plenty enough clearance the way this chassis mounts for stuff to be hanging down out of the bottom of it. And normally I wouldn't be this sloppy with one, but like I said, when one's this packed up and I have to make do with what parts I have on hand, and that's just the way it is. Alright, here it is back together, and I don't know how accurate the dial is because it's all worn off anyway, so...
Your gun rights are under attack as never before.
And this tuning condenser is still a little flaky, but like I said, I'm to the point I don't care. It's not going to get used, so... And if you wonder why I focus on a lot of record players, that's why. At least with those, I have some control over the content that's heard on them. Short of an AM transmitter, which I have, I just haven't set up, I don't have any control over the content that I hear over these things, which happens to be crap that I don't care to hear anyway, so... That's why these radio videos are probably going to start turning into resurrections instead of restorations.
For Glock Chev 3s, 4s, and 5s, these do...
You can prepare your pet for a natural disaster, talk to your veterinarian, and visit BanfieldFoundation.org.
See this kind of trash. Like I've said before, I don't have anything against black gospel music, but I prefer the older black gospel music, not this crap.
Without it, and their willingness to keep fighting, even to the point of,
And on this station, all you're going to hear is sports and talk, and then the one above that, you're going to hear Southern gospel and preachers. And then above that, you're going to hear the same sports programming that you hear on 1010. So, just not a lot of, really not a lot of motivation to to really go all out on these things anymore.
Stories about officers, and I think...
And we got the game kicking off here shortly. Raiders on the road. It's free.
And this tuning condenser is still a bit stiff, even after I lubricated it. But that's about all I've got for this thing right now. When I get some bulbs, I may open it back up and pop a new light bulb in it. I don't know. And before we end this, we'll talk about speakers for a minute. One of the challenges with replacing a speaker in an old radio oftentimes is the mounting. Unfortunately, in many cases, the speaker is not mounted with just 2 or 4 holes that are on the frame of the speaker. There's some kind of oddball bracket that is often permanently attached to the old speaker, and you have to get real creative in mounting the new speaker. And of course, there's always the option of having the old speaker reconed. You can do that, which of course that's often more costly than replacing the speaker, but by having the old speaker reconed, you eliminate the need of having to jury rig some kind of new mounting scheme to mount the new speaker. And another problem we run into is even if we can easily mount the new speaker to the radio, oftentimes the old speaker had provisions on it for mounting an audio output transformer, and oftentimes this transformer is riveted to the original speaker, but the new speakers don't have such provisions, so you have to once again get creative. Sometimes it means mounting the audio output transformer on the radio chassis somewhere if you have enough room. But now you may be wondering, why did they permanently mount the transformer on the speaker? Well, you've got to remember that back when those speakers were made, tubes were the only thing going. And since a vacuum tube is a high impedance device which requires a matching transformer to match the high impedance of the tube to the low impedance of a speaker voice coil, then it was just a given that the transformer would be permanently mounted to the speaker. And when you bought a replacement speaker, many times, most of the time, the replacement speaker came with the new transformer already mounted on it, so when you change the speaker, you ended up changing the speaker and transformer at the same time. But then solid state came along, and some of the early solid state designs used an audio output transformer, but before long, solid state amplifiers became available that required no audio output transformer between the audio output stage and the speaker itself, so speakers started to be made with no provisions for mounting an audio output transformer. So that's the reason we have to get creative. We often have to get more creative than we'd really like to get, but that's just the way it is. Okay, I dug up a 47 bulb out of my junk box. It's a used one, but it still works. And I decided to remove the output transformer from the speaker because even with that tape on it, insulating it from that terminal strip, it could still, over time, that tape could become compromised and short out. So, since we have clearance under the chassis, I just attached the transformer here to the chassis itself, which I'll show you in just a few minutes.
Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was the most important justice in the
I
United
worked
States
on this tuning condenser a little mower and got rid of the intermittent crackles, but it's still kind of stiff.
That's what the country...
Of course, it might have been designed that way.
It was Roberts, but he's now off that with Trump. So it has been moving to the right.
Since this is a direct tuning model, but
at the ideological center because he's...
I've tried spraying these bearings. I've tried applying heat to them. I've tried contact cleaner. I've tried oil, and this thing, it's as free as it's going to get, I think. Alright, I suppose we'll align it the correct way now since I decided to go back in it and since I cooled off some. So, we have the signal generator set to 455 kilocycles, low side to chassis, hot side of the generator connected through a .047 cap to the control grid of the oscillator and mixer tube. The directions say connect to the control grid of the IF amplifier tube and adjust the second IF transformer first, and then move back to the control grid of the converter tube and then adjust the first IF transformer. Well, that's really only needed when things are bad out of alignment, like somebody got in there with a golden screwdriver and tightened down everything. So we're tuned to 455. We have the volume wide open. I have only enough signal generator output to give me a indication. The generator and the radio have warmed up for both 15 minutes. And now we need to get under the bottom and adjust the second IF transformer. Alright, that's a little louder. Okay, get in there. That's a little louder. Now back up to the first IF transformer. Yeah, that was way off, wasn't it? As was that one. Turn the generator down. Yeah, I know my bench is a mess. That's the next thing on the itinerary is clean it all. I'll get in there. That's probably about maximum. And next, they want us to radiate a signal at 1500 from the signal generator into the receiver and set the dial to 1500. And since this dial was already not attached, I'm using it to help aid in the alignment because there's no kind of markings or anything. So we'll just set it to the top of the dial and have the pointer positioned to where it would be in the set, and then set it to about 1500 and adjust for maximum tone. They want us to first peak out the RF trimmer and then the oscillator trimmer at 1500, and then they want us to set it to 580, and then there's a trimmer here on the back they want us to peak out at 580 and then go back to 1500 and make sure that's still within spec, and it probably won't be. You'll have to alternate the two trimmers back and forth until you get them pretty close, and then that should take care of the alignment. And oddly enough, that's actually pretty close to 1500 without me touching anything, but let's tweak it and see if we can peak it up some. That was probably about as good as it's going to get. With both hands holding the dial and adjusting these trimmers, I was able to get it peaked out a little better, so much so that I had to turn the signal generator down. Now let's set the generator and radio to 580 and peak out that trimmer on the rear of the... Okay, what's supposed to be coming in at 580 is actually coming in at about 650, so yeah, we're going to have to alternately adjust those two trimmers until we can get the dial to track as close as possible. Okay, that's dialed in a little better. Now we move back to 1500 and see if that's still within range. Okay, so I fixed that wire, replaced that cap, and there's the output transformer soldered to the chassis there.
Will
be fewer quarantines, and hopefully this trend will keep continuing so that we can get back to
so we have WVAX radio.
Exactly. And when you are, I know the airlines have a lot of these precautions, so when you're at more time with their patients, that would help create a relationship.
To help take the burden off the whole experience of working.
Not quite late enough for WSM yet.
I tell you what's impressive about him. Concentration and his knack and nose for the ball.
Well, don't freak out.
Can add more local flavor to their menus, support student nutrition, and help increase access to Texas-grown food for students across the Lone Star State. The program also helps boost the
www.queencityfoot.com.
Protect your privacy online.
Should not miss out on what's available.
Customize that today at iHeart.
Your goals, your future, your dreams.
We'll get a little later. We ought to get better reception, but yeah, this dial really needs to be replaced, but I don't know if anybody's making reproductions or not. Okay, there's WSM coming in a little bit with my hand placed near the antenna. If I connected an external antenna to this, I think it would receive it with no problem, and it probably will receive it on its own anyway when it gets a little bit later. Or just rotate the radio. Alright, WSM still coming in.
Both ends of the port.
Commitment is from
It's about the only worthwhile thing I can get on AM on a regular basis.
Dog is growling when we take his food away. We think that that's dangerous.
I growl when people take my food away too.
With the podcast, find the one you've been.
He said Mike Tyson, I would be able to kill terrorists if we need point in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, anywhere else around.
Well, that's about all I've got for this, so hope you got something out of it, and
right now that we
more to come later.
Our people out of Afghanistan and anybody that's
Where's WSM? Faded out again.